Oh, thank you. Let me first thank Vincenzo Falabella for accommodating this change in the program. I was supposed to speak in the afternoon. Um, there are many different disabilities, and we have discussed the taxonomy of these differences, different ways of grouping people. There are differences among individuals, but there are differences among countries. And here I'm going to invite you to look at a different subset of the world, which are the remote communities in the world. And this picture shows the community in the middle of the Amazon. Um, so we'll be talking about people that are in remote areas that are unique in many regards. They're not only unique because they are isolated, but also because they have distinct cultures. Oftentimes one thinks of a country like uh, Colombia, for example, my friend Monique here, but it's very different, the reality in the capital city of Bogota compared to the Amazon. Likewise, in my country, Brazil. Um, these are large numbers of people. This is a research by C4, the Center for International Forestry, that estimates about 1.6 billion people in rural areas live within 5 kilometers of a forest. About 20% of them depend on forests for their livelihood. And about two-thirds of these people live in low or middle income countries. So this is sort of the group that I'll be talking about. Um, there are big cultural differences between indigenous societies and these uh, uh, groups compared to main societies or the sort of mainstream societies. Um, some have strong differences in terms of how they deal with disabilities. Some of them murder people with disabilities at birth. This is not a general rule, but this does exist. And also, they have practices which, in some ways, are more positive, as, for example, there are collective meals so that everybody share the same meal. So there are less differences in many cases in terms of access to food and other goods. And there are also an issue of ethical challenges. Since these cultures are very distinct, uh, inserting programs into these cultures have to take into account values that are different in as relate to the sort of the overall society. From an institutional point of view, these remote areas tend to have less political weight. They have few votes, and people vote less frequently than those in urban areas. So there's a tendency for institutions to neglect those groups that are in remote areas. And that makes the issue of disabled persons even more challenging because there are less resources, relatively speaking, to urban areas. Public schools, for example, we had a discussion about inclusion of disabled people in public schools. Well, public schools in these areas tend to be much, much poorer than those in urban areas in the same country. Um, and the same goes for staff. So staff tends to have less access to training. And there are very different causes of disabilities. And here's an illustration of snake bites. Snake bites are a relevant source of disabilities. A lot of people have motor problems as a result of snake bites, which is something very different from the images that one see in urban and developed world. Um, and they can deprive children of a number of skills, including sensory skills, and also their capacity of learning in their school process. If we look at the data, most of this is data from the Legal Amazon in Brazil. The blue is visual deficiency. The orange is hearing. So in a way, a lot of the disabilities that we have are treatable. But again, the access to health services is much poor in those situations. Um, there is a positive side, which is therapy related to nature. Nature is a great source of um, development and healing, and a lot of these people are in close contact with nature. So that can offer an interesting opportunity for working and engaging, and that in a way speaks to Sister Helen's paper that we just heard. Um, Another point that I'd like to highlight is that the issue of climate injustice. A lot of these societies are suffering a lot from climate change, and they have done the least to create the problem. So there's an issue of climate injustice. What you see in the left is the very severe drought we had last year in the Amazon, which was the all-time record drought. And of course, if one has difficulties in terms of movement, having no boats means that you cannot get out of your house to do whatever. And I think we have to take a sort of a systems approach to this issue of disabled persons. And here I divide it in four segments. So governments in these areas tend to give a lower priority. It's low political weight. So that's the challenge. Academia, we also have a lot less research. It's very hard to find information on uh, people with disabilities in remote areas. I did research on this and was very hard to come up with detailed information. And I reached out to my colleagues in the medical sciences, and there was very little information about that. So we need more data. Civil society organizations also have a greater challenge because it's more expensive to get to those remote areas. And business don't know how to deal with those realities for the most part. You know, they are in very distinct setting, cultural setting. That's not to say that there are things happening that can be a source of hope. Um, the use of internet in educating, for example, community health agents has made a major difference in terms of providing new opportunities for training for teachers in public schools, as well as new methods developed by civil society organizations, as one seen the right-hand side here. Um, I'd like to share with you something which is sort of outside of the box. One think of a therapy for a disabled person in a place like Rome. One would very rarely think that the best solution is swimming with dolphins. And there's a fantastic story here of a young boy, about 12 years old, in the Amazon, and he lived in a floating house. And as a result of a very particular story, all of a sudden their parents saw him playing with this dolphin. And the dolphins have a very particular kind of intelligence and sensitivity. And it turns out that that particular dolphin sort of fell in love with this boy. And that turned out to become a new therapy. So a group of people with disabilities have begun swimming with dolphins, and that became something very unique. That's to illustrate the need of thinking of outside of the box, considering that the setting in which these indigenous peoples are is so distinct from what one would envision. And here I bring the case of the image that I saw in the opening session here by Sheila Hollins when she showed the image of a house in UK. So it's very, very distinct. So there was a previous discussion about the need of having less of an Eurocentric view of the challenge that we have with disabled people. This image shows university groups getting involved with people with disabilities. So oftentimes one would think that it's only the public schools, but also I think there are other institutions that can play a role in reaching out to people with disabilities in these settings. And this image shows a house being visited by a community health agent by the institution that I lead, which is the Foundation for Amazon Sustainability, just to illustrate how different it is having a person with disability in a house like this. The resources available are very different. The risks are very different. The opportunities in terms of employment are quite different. So I think it's very important to have a sort of a very decentralized or very open view of the challenges that we have ahead. So indigenous people demand very special attention. And one has also to consider that they suffer from the legacy of colonialism. Latin America had, and other parts of the world, Africa as well, suffered from colonialism for many centuries. And what we do have in many parts of the world is the legacy of that. So there are high rates of alcoholism and high rates of suicide. And part of that has to do with this legacy. And I'd like to move towards the end of this presentation with a call for a systems approach. We have to think very broadly. And again, going back to these four segments of stakeholders, so to speak. Governments need to increase the efficiency and efficacy of their policies. They need to reach out, not only increase the investment, but also build partnerships. I mentioned here partnerships with universities. So it's not only charging public policies, because oftentimes people think, oh, we need better public policies. That we mean we need better government. Yes, we do. But not only governments should deliver the actions that are needed. In academia, I think there's a great need for more research. So I think the academy should include a call for more research on disabled persons in remote areas so that we have a better understanding of not only the reality, but also the possible solutions that do exist. Civil society organizations play a very important role. Again, I don't think it's only governments. Governments tend to be not very creative, whereas civil society in general tend to have higher levels of creativity and innovation that can be taken up by governments and other players as well. And business, there is the whole agenda of ESG, environment, social issues, and governance. And we should encourage business to reach out more to those communities. And again, I think this relates to Sister Helen's call for employment policies. And I think business should reach out more to those areas. And like to finish with the two messages from Pope Francis, that we must ensure that indigenous peoples don't lose their roots and always drink from their own fountains. That means that although we have to bring in technology, we have to bring in science, we must ensure that they maintain their roots and their culture. And the other message is that welcoming people with disabilities and responding to their needs is a duty that we all have. So I think this call is very unique. And finally, I think I'd like to go back to the dolphin story. I think there are many ways in which these societies could develop their own solutions. So I think we should not only see them as in need, but also we should see them as having the potential to develop their own solutions, moving away from this sort of top-down or outside tendency to preach to the local communities. And I'd like to finish with a short video, only 40 seconds, to illustrate a little bit of the images of what is being done in some parts of the Amazon where I come from, which is basically reaching out to people that tended to be isolated and not receiving enough attention. This video that I hope it's in the way, yeah, it's going to illustrate this. It's only 40 seconds.
Hoje, olhando nossos alunos do ensino médio, que passaram por esse processo de acompanhamento no programa, eles têm uma nova perspectiva de vida. A FAS, ela não nos enxergou apenas como números, ela nos enxergou como essência cabocla, essência indígena, quilombola, ribeirinha. E transformou todos os nossos conhecimentos de saberes e fazeres da floresta em potência.
Nós moramos tão longe, nós merecemos isso, né? Às vezes as pessoas falavam assim, poxa, ninguém olha pra gente e hoje nós estamos sendo vistos, né? Pelas pessoas.
Pintou uma luz, botou uma luz no mundo, né? Que se chama FAS, né? Tem nos ajudado muito até a data de hoje, né?
Thank you.